graphical presentations that the two previous speakers do. By training, we're taught to use our words. That's not an insult to either of you. I wish I had pretty grams. I'll try to be brief. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the coalition, we are membership supported. We have 7,500 members. We're a nonprofit dedicated to the restoration, protection, and sustainable use of Buzzards Bay and its watershed. And that includes the towns of Bourne and Falmouth. The coalition works to improve the health of the bay and its more than 30 harbors and coves for all through education, conservation, research, and advocacy. Our advocacy and policy initiatives at the coalition are driven by science. And as a foundation for our advocacy program, we have the largest volunteer coastal monitoring program in the Commonwealth. We monitor water quality at more than 100 sites around Buzzards Bay, with more than a third of those are currently on Cape Cod. So we base our advocacy initiatives on this science, and the data has shown us, we have 19 years of data, and that data has shown us that nitrogen pollution is the greatest long-term threat to the health of Buzzards Bay and its harbors and coves, and clearly as well to the balance of Cape Cod. It's that fact and that 19 years of data which has spurred the coalition to action here. I'm not going to go over the problems with nitrogen. The two previous speakers did a great job of talking about nitrogen. I'm going to add a little bit of color and share some anecdotes that we've heard from our members about the problem with nitrogen on Cape Cod. And some of these anecdotes you may be able to relate to very easily. I had a member tell me a story once when he was a young adult. He always complained about how much eelgrass used to get caught in the propellers of his boats when he was either sailing or boating, and it was an annoyance to him. And now, as he is spending more and more time on the Cape, that never happens. And that's just a small testimony to the fact that there is no more eelgrass, and there's no more eelgrass because we have too much nitrogen. Another member told a great story that when he was raising his children on West Falmouth Harbor, they would come down. They were summer residents, and they would come down to the summer, and they would go out and they would pick up the crabs and the critters out in West Falmouth Harbor, and they'd put them in an aquarium and bring them up to the house, and they would, watch the lifespan of these critters over the summer. They would feed them, and they would change the water from West Falmouth Harbor, and it was sort of their saltwater, real-life aquarium, and he was teaching his children about these critters. He now tries to do that with his grandchildren, and there's so much nitrogen in the tank from the water that he's taking from West Falmouth Harbor that within a week it turns green. They can't see anything, and everything dies. And so it's just sort of a real-life kind of hokey examples of what we're dealing with out on Cape Cod. Biggest source of nitrogen on Cape Cod, as the previous speakers have said, septic systems. 80% of the nitrogen is coming from septic systems. 85% of the Cape is on septic systems. Tidal V septic systems do not treat for nitrogen. You get a little bit of attenuation in the biomap, predominantly that the water from the septic system is discharged to sandy soils and out to our estuaries. It's the primary issue. And the population boom that Paul had shown us on his great slides is just, for the Cape in the past few decades, is just exacerbating this problem. We've invited, more people are attracted to the Cape. They come. We have more septic systems, we have more impervious surface, and we have more Cod Wastewater treatment facilities, and all of this nitrogen is now impairing our coastal estuaries. Another way to look at the problem is that the Cape sort of grew backwards. The population came, but the infrastructure didn't come with it. For example, in Bourne, around Phineas Harbor, there were about 5,000 people in 1960. It's grown today to more than 20,000 people. And while in 1960, Phineas Harbor could probably have handled the septic load from 5,000 residents around it, it can't with the 20,000 residents around it. So we're clearly overloading our systems. Similarly, in the population in the town of Falmouth, it's 4 times what it was in 1950, and nearly all of this growth has occurred on septic systems. And Cape-wide, I think that the statistic in this doesn't even consider the statistic in on the Cape during the summer, we grow more than 300%, as shown by the slide that Paul had. Joan did a great job at the outset setting how unique and fragile our ecosystems are and how beautiful they are. This is what attracts people here. You know that, and it's for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is that people love the coastal environments. We need to protect those resources so that they're here for us to enjoy and our children and our grandchildren to enjoy. You all know our coastal economy here on the Cape depends on clean water. Our commercial and recreational fishing interests, our real estate values, and our tourism depend on clean water. Coalition is concerned that this very well-documented problem, and as we've heard, a solvable problem, has gone addressed for decades. It's only getting worse. Despite the fact that we know what the problem is, what the sources are, new septic systems, every year, new Title V septic systems are being installed. We know they're the cause of the problem. They continue to be installed and permitted by the state. This makes the problem worse, not better. So, in an effort to move the protection and restoration of the Cape waters forward off of this, yes, we know what the problem is, we know what the sources are. The Coalition and the Conservation Law Foundation in August filed a suit against the EPA for failing to adequately permit the discharge of these nitrogen sources on Cape Cod. So these are the septic systems, stormwater systems, and wastewater treatment plants. The EPA has been eerily silent on this problem for the last few decades. It's time that they step up and join in solving it. The EPA's responsibility here is when you have waters that are overloaded with nitrogen, that the science tells us that they're not meeting their water quality standards. We don't have eelgrass anymore. The oxygen is too low. It's causing fish kills. The critters are gone. They are listed on what's called the Clean Water Act's Dirty Waters list. So they're sick waters. What that does is it triggers the requirement for EPA to pass these what's called total maximum daily loads. They're otherwise known as federal nitrogen limits. So it's a budget. So EPA will determine how much nitrogen can be in the water and have those waters still be healthy. And they've used the science from the MEP to establish those. What has happened is that EPA, while they're setting these federal limits, they're ducking their responsibility in properly regulating the sources. They're telling you have to meet a limit, but they're not regulating the septic systems, the stormwater, and the wastewater treatment plant as direct discharges. Instead, they're allowing these sources to remain unregulated, not insisting that nitrogen be reduced from these sources. Not only is this a violation of the Clean Water Act, it fails to provide the citizens of Cape Cod with clean water. It's the Coalition's position, together with the Conservation Law Foundation, that EPA be brought to the table and held accountable under federal law. And they need to make cleaning up Cape Cod's waters a priority. The Clean Water Act provides a clear framework to get this done. EPA has not applied it here on Cape Cod, and they need to. And that's the purpose of our lawsuit. A successful outcome will be the appropriate regulation by EPA, and it will require wastewater management planning in all of our communities and implementation to achieve these limits and to achieve water quality. Previous speakers talked a lot about the problem, so I'm going to cut my remarks short and let Dane take a crack at this. But I do want to just say a word about financing. This planning and implementation is going to be costly for the residents in the Cape. It's likely to be the biggest capital improvement project Cape Cod has seen, but they're also facing one of the largest environmental issues that they've seen. I want to emphasize that we've known about this problem for decades. An area-wide plan issued in 1978 under the Clean Water Act, in the second paragraph on the first page said eutrophication of Cape's waters is a major concern. 34 years later, we're still talking about the problem and we haven't enacted any solutions. I want to use that lesson that if we had acted 30 years ago, perhaps it would have cost less money. We would have water quality today. I don't want to belabor hindsight's 2020. I don't want to dwell on the fact that action wasn't taken 30 years ago. I want to use that as a lesson as to why we need to act now, so that future generations are not paying so much more money that we will be faced with today. We all want clean water. We're all going to have to contribute to that. I think bringing the federal government to the table fixes a regulatory mistake that we've been dealing with for the last couple of decades, as well as it gets the attention of a potentially a well-financed partner to the table. So in conclusion, we know the problem, we know the sources, we have solutions, but we need to act. Clearly, action must be taken now to restore our water and for the heritage of Cape Cod as well.